YouTube, this is Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to my review series, Sexism in Movies and TV. So there's a whole list of reasons I could make as to why I do this show. In fact, during the Season 8 finale, I made a top 10 list of the double standards that Hollywood has when it comes to gender, or biological sex, whatever you want to call it. And I did make a lot of good points, and there are a ton of other topics. But the biggest and most glaring issue with what I tackle in this series boils down to the word hypocrisy. I mean, a lot of the stuff that happens to characters who are male on mostly American TV are things that would never happen to a female character in a million years. There's no way the FCC or foreign television would ever let that happen. If they did, Tumblr, X, Twitter, whatever social media platform is infested with cancel pigs at the moment, would rip them apart, metaphorically speaking. One reason I have to do this show more or less comes down to one word, and that is validation. Now, there are a ton of characters on TV who would be complete toxic role models for girls. And when it comes to those characters and their massive egos, the show will instantly validate them as opposed to taking a stand with reality and put them in their place the way they would with any male character, even if he's a character who's in the right. And that's kind of something that you don't see on American TV or shows imported from Japan, i.e. anime. Seems like good role models for boys on TV and in films have dwindled, while the number of bad role models for girls has not only gone up, but yeah, I'm just gonna say it. The people who write this schlock will instantly validate their horrid behavior at every point. And it's not just bad behavior. They also have massive egos that these crap shows will instantly bend over to validate as well. And when they're not doing that, they're more or less depriving girls of actual good role models. Instead, most role models for girls are the worst type of brats you can imagine. You know, the kind that would actually hurt their brother over something completely insignificant and minuscule. In recent years, positive role models for boys have fallen by the wayside. replaced by spineless cucks who cannot stand up for themselves and will bend over backwards for a girl, whether she be family or someone he has a crush on, and will more or less be screwed over in the end. And when you look at how these terrible episodes of TV shows and horrible films are written, the show and or film thinks this is okay. It says an awful lot about the jackass who wrote it. We need a men's rights revolution when it comes to the entertainment industry, specifically in film and television, because if we don't, things are going to stay the same. I blame the current state of movies and TV as to why young boys and young men have such low self-esteem. It should be pretty obvious that's why. No good role models equals terrible self-esteem. And those are some really good reasons as to why I do this series. In this episode, I will be going after the 1994 TV adaptation of Weird Science. A show I never thought I'd have to go after on this series when I started it back in 2016. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. The title of the episode in question is The Feminine Mistake. And it reads, Lisa has had enough of Gary and Wyatt's sexist remarks, so she turns them into girls. They get a glimpse of how the other half lives when Wyatt's brother, Chet, gets into a fight over Gary. Do I need to even point out how hypocritical this is? Women have been comparing men to apes and pigs and saying all sorts of dehumanizing things about them. I don't even need to watch the episode to come to the conclusion that whatever Gary and Wyatt said was not that bad. I'll admit that I was wrong when I said this episode was like Witch a Woman from Johnny Bravo. I may have said that. But to be frank, it's actually a far worse version of the boy who would be Queen from Fairly Odd Parents. And both of which are, well, they are very good examples as to why these jackasses in Hollywood who probably don't even know the actual meaning of the word equality. You know, the one that's in the actual Webster's Dictionary or on Wikipedia, because I guarantee you, Wikipedia is by no means accurate. But if it says that equality is treating someone the way you would treat yourself or someone you respect without any biases whatsoever, which, since we're all human, we can't truly do, if they're not defining equality like that, then it's clear that these morons don't know what the goddamn word means, and they should not be trying to talk about sexism under any circumstances. Back in 2019, I ripped apart the episode Dragon Quest from the show My Little Pony. And to be blunt, I admitted in that episode that I didn't need to watch the show to know what the plot would be. And as time has passed, I've heard people speak about this episode. When I say that, I mean I've heard people mention it in a second-hand way. I haven't been watching reviews of the episode, but I've heard what people say about it, and, well, the plot is exactly what I said it was, beat for beat. I will admit that saying you don't need to watch something to know how the episode will play out is pretty goddamn arrogant. And under normal circumstances, it'd be completely true. But this is the exception. Because, I've heard secondhand mentions of this episode, and it basically plays out the way I said it would, beat for beat. The baby dragon gets mocked by the ponies for acting like a girl. He tries to find dragon friends because ponies are the metaphor for girls and dragons are the metaphor for boys. And like I predicted, all of the dragons were basically asshole bullies. I'm just gonna say this. Lisa's actions in this episode were completely unwarranted. There is no excuse you can think of, no statement sexist enough that justifies the shit she pulled in this episode. And I guarantee you that this little cunt here got off scot-free, because this was made by the same pinheads who made Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Saved by the Bell, one of which I have ripped apart in the past, and both times I compared it to a Saturday morning cartoon for kids that actually took the exact same plot that Saved by the Bell was trying to do, or the message they were trying to get across, or something similar, and did it 10 times better. Now I'm going to show you how this episode kind of goes against the marketing that NBC had to make this piece of crap part of what could have been one of the greatest shows of the 90s. This is, it is the original piece of marketing for the show. And it says, in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell created the telephone. In 1879, Thomas Edison created the light bulb. In 1895, Sigmund Freud created modern psychology. In 1994, Gary and Wyatt created a woman who would do anything they wanted. Who do you think was smarter? Okay, Gary and Wyatt are supposed to be smart. Now, I know Lisa's a computer genie, but in all fairness, she should not be able to do this. I mean, yes, they created her, she is a genie, and here's the thing. They created her, but if they're as smart as the advertising portrays, they would have built something like this in as a failsafe. And, you could argue that maybe Lisa would have tricked them into wishing for this, but here's the thing. Gary and Wyatt are nerds, they're extremely smart, there's no way she'd be able to trick them into wishing for it. That in itself as a premise would make absolutely no sense. I'm going to say this right now. Lisa's actions in this episode were not justified by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just going to say it. This is basically this trope here, gender bender. They're trying to use this to teach a moral. A moral that makes absolutely no sense, and if done in reverse, which I guarantee you it never is, would cause instant backlash. Nothing Gary or Wyatt said warranted this. There's no way it could. I mean, I remember what TV was like back then. The stuff women were allowed to say about men was 100% dehumanizing. Yeah, men quote-unquote objectify women, but women do the exact same thing, and it's actually worse. We're viewed as walking ATMs. In all fairness, Weird Science was essentially the Fairly Odd Parents before Oh Yeah Cartoons was even a show. And to be blunt, well, they did it, and it was just as sexist when they did it. Even after turning Timmy into a girl, Wanda got no consequences for her actions. Even the idiots on TV tropes think that, well, they don't blame this trope exactly. They created one of their own called The Worst Writers Are Male, which anyone with a brain could tell you is a lie. Oh, the worst writers are male, are they? Well, let me ask the question. What show again had the all-female staff? Yeah, I didn't think so. The worst writers are male, my ass. The worst writers are women. How do these idiots equate this to being a karmic transformation? Okay, how come we haven't gotten the episode of The Simpsons where Lisa Simpson is turned into a boy? Or one where Haley Smith is turned into a boy? Or one of High Guardian Shit where they're turned into boys? Hell, how come in this episode Lisa isn't turned into a man? Something I will touch upon later, I promise. Something I will touch upon later, I promise. But my rage aside, Lisa should have gotten consequences to her actions. I mean, this episode should have ended with Gary and Wyatt introducing their new computer genie. A stronger, much more attractive, and upgraded version of Lisa, who then traps Lisa in a computer and subjects her to a non-stop simulation where she is violated over and over again until time stops. Or Lisa could be turned into a man and actually get accused of sexual harassment by some gold-digging, money-grubbing whore, or forced into a marriage, put through a divorce court, and end up as a wage slave, knowing how hard it is to cope with a divorce as a man, knowing she now has to give some good-for-nothing cunt half of everything she has for half of everything she has, assuming this woman doesn't fake a pregnancy. As hard as it is to believe, Weird Science was made by NBC. The same people who created the gynocentric piece of trash known as Saved by the Bell, and they also made Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, that show starring Will Smith where he acted like a massive pervert? And they actually had an episode where one girl pretends to try and rape him for social acceptance. Carlton helps them do it, and Will plays along so that bitch could join the bitch circle. No one in that episode was likable, and reflecting on how Will Smith has acted recently, it's not the kind of thing that would put him in a good light. It would take some of his recent actions and, make you think, yeah, what would you expect from that guy? He's just a cuck. NBC did create those shows. They also made Weird Science. But you want to know what else NBC made and is seen even today, 30 years later, as their magnum opus? Something that could have only been made in the 90s and would never fly at any other point in time because it would trigger all of the gynocentric, man-hating, feminist snowflakes on the internet. I'll give you a couple seconds to think, because you'll never get it. Seinfeld. They were the ones behind Seinfeld, a show that featured Elaine, a man-hating feminist who got arrested not in the controversial series finale, but in a typical episode for hiring Newman to try and kill a dog that was giving her problems. Elaine is vegan, she's extremely on the left, and she's constantly portrayed as a hypocrite. And in this particular episode, when she's actually given consequences for her actions, we instantly see her undergo a mental breakdown when she knows she now has a criminal record. There was also that really funny thing in the last few seasons where she had a shot at running the company, and I actually think she did run the company, the one that published the book by her boss, who was this raging narcissist. And when he came back and was no longer insane, she lost all her stock, it became null and void, and her shot at CEO went flying out the window. Also, they had the episode with the Elaine mannequin made by the creep who had a crush on her. You know, the one who was obsessed with he had the same obsession with the TV guides that Frank and Estelle Costanza did. Really gotta say, the hypocrisy in this episode is major. It's over 9,000. Based on how Weird Science was marketed, this episode, and yes, I will use other shows as comparisons, feels like the equivalent of Pokemon, which more or less dumps all of Pokemon's messaging and more or less acts like it's some creepypasta that declares Pokemon to be the spawn of the devil, and more or less the plot of the episode is a bunch of humans hunting and killing Pokemon, to which, in the end of the episode, they are, well, more or less in the right for doing. They'd be praised as heroes for murdering all these Pokemon in an episode of the Pokemon anime adaptation. Or an episode of Zoe 101 similar to the cheerleader episode, but with a twist where the douchebag rival is actually in the right, because on that show he was the villain even when he wasn't, actually following the exact same premise, but with the twist that they get the slave Leia treatment, and the episode would end with them performing more or less a mix of the go-go enslavement trope and the dance party ending. Or an alternate, better episode to Lisa Goes Gaga, where after getting nowhere with Lisa and talking to Marge, Lady Gaga gets the approval from Marge and Homer to brainwash Lisa Clockwork Orange style, and Lisa ends up becoming an exact duplicate of Lady Gaga at the end, to the point where she wants to be a pop star in the future, has no interest in anything intellectual, which is what her ego is attached to, and copies Lady Gaga's appearance and mannerisms point for point. If any of those things happened, they would be those shows equivalent to The Feminine Mistake. Something that goes against everything that a show like this is supposed to stand for. Because in the examples I used, those hypothetical examples would be those shows going against everything they stood for. I'm just going to say it again. The message does not work with this show. In the marketing for this, and I mean the original marketing, they compared Gary and Wyatt to some of the greatest minds that existed before 1994. As in, they're all smarter than they are the pinnacle of intelligence in universe. The message doesn't work and the premise doesn't work. Because the premise essentially implies that Lisa is able to trick them, and if we're listening to how the show was advertised and its message, yeah, that wouldn't work, as they would be smarter. And the other alternative is she goes rogue, which, given the idea that these two dorks are smart, they would have prepared ahead of time for something like this. especially since Weird Science is or was Fairly Odd Parents before Oh Yeah Cartoons even aired. Because this isn't the first time Lisa has granted a wish that backfired. They would prepare for a scenario like this, and they would alter her to make sure something like this wouldn't happen. And if she refused, they would destroy her, because they would foresee something like this happening in the future. Back on the concept of a show's themes and how it was marketed. I'm going to give you some examples of, the idea of hypothetical episodes that goes against everything the franchise itself would stand for. Imagine an episode of the My Little Pony reboot where the ponies essentially, turned against each other and became enemies for an entire episode. It would be canon. It would not be an alternate universe story. It would essentially be the characters that the little girls and creepy older men know, basically becoming toxic bitches and arch enemies for an entire episode, completely unprovoked, for no reason whatsoever. Episode of the Powerpuff Girls, where, when I say Powerpuff Girls, I mean the original series, where the Powerpuff Girls get beaten down, completely humiliated, and need to be saved by the Justice Friends. Parody characters that were meant to be a middle finger to Marvel Comics. As in, the people who made this specifically made this because they're under Warner Brothers and they want to make Marvel look stupid. Or an episode of any show in the DCAU that either glorifies crime or says that the heroes are completely misguided, they don't know what they're talking about, and the characters they're assaulting are actually in the right. And when I say that, I mean an episode of anything in the DCAU that was made after Batman the Ultimate Evil was written. Either that or a hypothetical Star Wars show or movie that would act as an alternate ending to Return of the Jedi, where we find out that everything after Leia's capture and the sequel trilogy, it never happened. In this, we would find out that Leia actually went crazy because of the time she spent as Jabba the Hutt's slave. Something like that would go against everything that Star Wars stands for, even before it was purchased by the Walt Disney Corporation. This episode could have worked if it was a deconstruction of the men are jerks, get turned into women, and learn what it's like to be a girl plot, but let's face reality. Those plots are completely unrealistic, and we all know NBC wouldn't even dare go there. Johnny Bravo tried it. Everyone called it mean-spirited. The kids watching, adults on the internet, and years later, the those same kids who had grown up into adults on the internet. I mean, Nexomon is a perfect example of deconstruction because it actually implies that if Pokemon were real, they'd be trying to kill us. There'd be no friendship, no trust, no love between trainer and Pokemon. The Pokemon would want us dead. There have been tons of theories that imply it. Theories that imply that Pokemon are devils and that the franchise is set after the Rapture. And the only reason why the Nexomon are not murdering the Tamers left and right is because characters in this game tend to break the fourth wall to make sure it has a happy ending. One of the high-level Nexomon, the equivalent to a legendary that you cannot catch, she actually causes a tidal wave when the characters are on a boat, and in an instance of fourth wall breaking, the original champion, I think, who's basically a ghost, says that everyone miraculously survived, and Atlas, the little robot here, kind of almost breaks the fourth wall, saying that this is a G-rated game, and therefore none of the heroes can be killed off. Also, the original champion views himself as a failure, and, well, says that Nexomon are devils. Yeah, it's a perfect deconstruction of Pokemon. The feminine mistake, which was a mistake alright, does not work with this sort of message. It could work if Gary and Wyatt were turned into women by Little Miss Cybercunt here, and the episode actually had them reap all the benefits of being women, just have no one notice them, have everyone assume they're a lesbian couple, but since they would come out attractive, they would actually reap all sorts of benefits, as in no man would dare punch them, getting them out of being bullied, and occasionally being able to charm perverts into getting stuff for free, and have Lisa throw a temper tantrum like a goddamn 4-year-old throughout the entire ordeal. And then have her say that it's all part of a lesson. So they decide to wish her into a man, and now as a man, Lisa, or say Lawrence, would get the crap kicked out of him, end up with all sorts of false accusations of sexual misconduct, and ends up getting arrested by the end, which forces Lawrence, in this case, to go back to being Lisa and turn her masters back into men. I'm just gonna say it. This message does not work with this show. In fact, it actually made me lose respect for it, because when you look at how it was marketed, in 1876, Alex Graham created the first telephone. In 1879, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. In 1895, Sigmund Freud created modern psychology. In 1994, Gary and Wyatt created a woman who would do anything they wanted. Emphasis on anything they wanted. Who do you think was smarter? Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. This is how it was marketed. And this is what the show is supposed to stand for. I mean, this is supposed to be the premise. And this is an episode that goes against every single thing that this show is supposed to stand for. But no, even then it would not be able to work. Because, yeah, this show was marketed on the premise that Gary and Wyatt here are smart. As in, they would be too smart to fall for something like this. And even if they weren't, they would have been smart enough to think ahead and alter Lisa's code so that she could never pull a stunt like this. This is the absolute worst episode to do a don't objectify women gender bender episode. By the way, where the hell is our don't objectify men, don't be a gold-digging whore episode for any show? I mean, I'm willing to listen if any of you out there can say that there's an episode of any series that did this. I would be more than willing to look into it. But I know that none of you can. Because despite the fact that women treat us like we're fucking ATMs, I guarantee you that no show would ever do something like this. I guarantee you of that. Let's get back to the Pokemon Nexomon comparison, because that's the perfect one here. Nexomon actually works because the characters in-universe tell you, the player, that Nexomon are evil. And in addition to that, assuming that you actually did read the dialogue and didn't skip through it just for monster battles, you will constantly notice that the characters often critique Pokemon and break the fourth wall, saying that because this is G-rated, no one died, and everyone survived miraculously from an accident that would have killed them. But even the original champion says that these things are evil, which is a perfect deconstruction of Pokemon, and how if these things were real, they'd either be trying to kill us or enslave us. I'm going to end this video by saying NBC should know better. I mean, Weird Science wasn't something like Saved by the Bell that was aimed at kids. But, on that note, they were also the ones behind Seinfeld. Either that, or they had a hand in it. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were the ones who made it. And when Elaine actually did something bad, she did get consequences for her actions. On the other hand, they made Saved by the Bell. which had Jessie on it, who was basically just a liberal idiot who thought she was smart. And believe me, they had a ton of episodes in which either it's like the episode Jessie's Song, where it's clear that this girl is doing something bad, but they refuse to give her consequences for her actions, like they always do, or a joke where it's clear that, her moral compass is completely misguided. Like her and her idiot mother were going to protest against fracking and drilling to obtain gas for cars, but they couldn't show up because their car was out of gas. Both Saved by the Bell and Weird Science aired on USA Network, but at completely different times. In all fairness, this is the type of show, it's not aimed at kids like Saved by the Bell was, so you could get away with a premise like this. Two dorks who created a woman who would do anything they wanted. Yes, that's the premise of the show. They violated that premise, and they really did it in a style of writing that never works and only enrages fans. Earlier in the video, I said that NBC needs more balance and less hypocrisy. And in all fairness, Weird Science would have been the perfect show for that balance, based on its premise. And I'm going to end this video by saying NBC needs more balance and less hypocrisy.